You were born a girl in Afghanistan, and this is your entire life.
You don't get to choose. Not the country, not the language, not the hands that catch you when you arrive. And you definitely don't get to choose whether those hands belong to someone who will protect you or a world that has already decided what you are worth before you take your first breath. In Afghanistan, if you are born a girl, that decision is made the moment they see your face. This is not a history lesson. This is one life. Your life. From the very first breath to right now. Stay until the end, because what happens to you, you need to witness, even though you never saw it coming. March 1995, Kabul. The city is already bleeding. You were born in the back room of your grandmother's house, by candlelight. The power has been out for 3 days. A midwife with rough hands brings you into the world, while rockets from a warlord faction hit somewhere across the city, close enough to rattle the windows, far enough that nobody runs. Your mother screams. Your grandmother prays. And then you cry, small, furious, alive. And for one moment, the war outside means nothing. Your father walks in and holds you. He looks at your face for a long time without speaking. Then he says your name, Mariam. Your mother laughs through tears and says he always acts like he controls everything. He doesn't. Nobody controls anything in this city. Kabul has been torn apart for 6 years by rival warlords, fighting with rockets and mortars in streets where people are just trying to survive. But tonight, in the candlelight, with you against his chest, your father believes he controls something. And that is enough. You are barely 1 year old when everything changes. September 1996, the Taliban marches into Kabul. The warlords vanish overnight. Something else arrives in their place. Not rockets, just rules. Thousands of rules. Within days, your mother stops leaving the house alone. The school where she once studied closes to women permanently. Your sister Fatima, 8 years old, just discovering she loves to read, comes home one afternoon and sits in the corner and stares at the wall. Her teacher told all the girls not to come back. She doesn't cry. She just sits there. You are too small to understand why, but you will spend the rest of your life understanding it more and more. 2000. You are 5 years old. Your world is the size of your house, your courtyard, and a crack in the mud brick wall that gives you a sliver view of the street in the Hindu Kush mountains beyond. You study those mountains every single day. You don't know why. You just know that looking at them makes something in your chest feel less small. Music is banned. Not discouraged, banned. And people have been beaten for it. Television is banned. The windows of your house are painted over so men outside cannot see female shapes moving inside. You grow up in a home that has made itself deliberately invisible. Your father teaches you and Fatima in secret. He was a civil engineer before the Taliban came. Now he does small repair work to survive and risks punishment every day to make sure his daughters can read. He writes letters on paper scraps. He teaches arithmetic with dried apricots. He makes you memorize Rumi, the great 13th century Persian poet, line by line, by heart, because he tells you they can burn every book in this country, Miriam, but they cannot reach inside your mind. You are 5 years old and you believe him completely. You will hold on to those words for 30 years. October 2001. You are 6. The bombs start falling. American bombs, after September 11 changed everything on the other side of the world. Heavier, more deliberate. The adults stare at the ceiling and nobody speaks. By November 13th, 2001, Northern Alliance forces, backed by American air power, take Kabul. Taliban fighters disappear, almost overnight, like smoke. 20 years of occupation begins. Nobody knows yet how it ends. One morning, your mother stands in the hallway holding her burqa. She puts it on, takes it off, puts it on again, takes it off, stands there with the blue fabric in her hands like she has forgotten what country she is in. You watch from the doorway. Neither of you says a word. It is one of the most important moments of your life, and it happens in complete silence.
2005. You are 10 years old. You have been in school for 3 years, and you love it with a fierceness that surprises even you. There are girls in your class who are 14, 15, girls who lost years they can never get back, who sit in those small chairs with the intensity of people who understand exactly what was taken from them. Reading feels like someone turned on a light in a room you didn't know was dark. Your father brings home a Dari English dictionary from a market stall, worn soft at the corners, someone else's name written inside, and you sleep with it next to your pillow. Kabul is rebuilding itself in real time. New shops, women in the streets without burqas. Not many, but some. A television appears in your home, and you and your mother and Fatima watch Indian soap operas and laugh until your stomachs hurt. The future, for the first time in your short life, feels like a place you might actually reach. But Afghanistan never stays simple for long. File that away.
2012. You are 17. You sit the Concours, Afghanistan's brutal national university entrance exam. One day, 12 subjects, tens of thousands of students competing for a fraction of the spots. Your hand cramps halfway through. You finish anyway. When the results come, you have scored high enough for Kabul University. Your father gets the news, walks out of the room. You follow him and find him in the courtyard with his back to you, shoulders shaking. He has never cried in front of anyone in your entire life. Today, he does. 2013. You are 18. University. These years, 18, 19, 20, 21, will become the brightest of your life. You walk through the gate of Kabul University on your first morning, and the noise of thousands of students moving in every direction takes your breath away. You study political science. You have a best friend named Shireen from Mazar-e-Sharif, sharp, funny, furious about everything wrong with the country. You spend evenings in the canteen over bad tea arguing about corruption, about whether American aid money is building Afghanistan or just building the bank accounts of the people close to power. By your third year, a policy paper you write gets cited in a UN report on women's access to justice. You find this out 2 years later and stand completely still for a full minute. Somewhere in a UN document, your words, proof you were here and that it mattered. 2016, you are 21. You graduate and get a job at a women's rights organization, writing reports, traveling in armored vehicles to provinces, collecting testimonies from women who have survived things you do not repeat out loud. You write them down instead. You send them to organizations in Europe and America. Documentation is resistance. Some days you believe this more than others. A man named Dawood, an engineer, quiet, with a laugh that surprises even him, marries you in 2018. The wedding is small. You are both practical, both aware that certainty is not something you build for here. But that night, dancing in your grandmother's courtyard, with Fatima holding your hands, you think, this is also real. This matters too. Your son Rostam is born in 2019, named after the great hero of Persian epic poetry. He has your stubbornness, visible at 2 months old. He is the most frightening and most magnificent thing that has ever happened to you. 2020. You are 25, and the world gets a new kind of sick. COVID-19 reaches Afghanistan in late February. First cases in Herat, near the Iranian border. Within weeks, it reaches Kabul. The government announces a lockdown, but lockdown here looks nothing like anywhere else. 80% of Afghans work in the informal economy. If they don't work, they don't eat. That is not a metaphor. That is arithmetic. So people keep working, because starving is also a way to die. Afghanistan has roughly 2 doctors for every 10,000 people, fewer than 1,000 ICU beds in the entire country. People die at home and are buried fast, and the real numbers are never recorded.
Your father gets sick that spring. He recovers, slowly, but comes back thinner and quieter, like the illness took something he didn't get back. In the evenings, he tells you stories about Kabul before all of this. A city with cinemas, women in universities in the 1970s, jazz from open windows. You listen like he is describing a country that doesn't exist. He dies in November 2020. His heart, the doctors say. He dies in the room where you were born. You hold his hand and say the Rumi back to him, the lines he made you memorize when you were 5. And you don't know if he can still hear you. You say it anyway.
And then comes August 2021. You were 26, and the world ends. Again. You know before the news says it. People who have lived through collapse recognize the signs the way sailors read weather. By August 6th, the Taliban takes Zaranj. By the 12th, Kandahar falls. Afghanistan's second city gone in hours. Herat falls. Mazar-e-Sharif, which everyone said would never fall, collapses on August 14th. On the 15th, the Taliban walks into Kabul. The government dissolves. President Ghani boards a plane and leaves the country. Just leaves. The presidential palace is empty by evening. What happens at the airport, you see on your phone, and you cannot look away and you cannot keep looking. Tens of thousands of people surge the tarmac. Men cling to American C-17 cargo jets, to the fuselage, the landing gear, the wings, because anything is better than staying. One plane lifts off with hundreds crammed inside, standing up, and others holding on from outside. Bodies fall from the sky above the city where you were born. You watch this in your bathroom with the door locked. Then, August 26th, 5:36 in the evening, an ISIS-K suicide bomber detonates at Abbey Gate, where thousands of desperate Afghans have been standing for days in the heat, wading through sewage water in a drainage canal, clutching papers, hoisting children. The blast kills more than 170 Afghans and 13 American service members. You hear it from across the city. You feel it in your chest before you know what it is. The rules arrive fast after that and keep coming. Women cannot work. Women cannot leave home without a male guardian. September 2021, girls above 6th grade banned from school. December 2022, universities closed to women entirely. Armed guards turn female students away at the gates. Afghanistan becomes the only country on earth with a formal legal ban on women's education. You think about your father, the paper scraps, the apricots, the Rumi, what he risked so you could read. He is gone, and sometimes that feels like the only mercy left.
2023. You are 28. April. Women banned from working for the UN and all international NGOs. Your entire career gone by decree. July. Beauty salons shut down, eliminating the last space where tens of thousands of women could earn anything. October. A 6.3 magnitude earthquake hits Herat. Then another. 3 major quakes in one day. Entire villages gone. The aid organizations that could help are now banned from using their female staff. The women who knew the terrain, the language, the communities. The relief effort stumbles without them. You read about this and feel a rage that has nowhere to go.
2024. You are 29. One afternoon, walking Rostam to school. Boys still go. That hasn't changed. You pass the gate of Kabul University. A lock on the gate. A guard outside. You walked through that gate every morning for 4 years. You keep walking. You don't slow down. You don't let Rostam see your face. 2025. You are 30. September. The Taliban bans 140 books written by women. Your friend Shireen made it to Canada. She messages from a gray city where it snows for 6 months, and she still doesn't own a proper coat. And she says she cries every day and would not come back for anything in the world. You understand both halves of this completely.
May 2026, the Taliban issues a new family law. One article states that a young woman's silence after puberty is considered consent to marriage. You read this after Rostam is asleep. You sit with it for a long time in the dark. 2026, you are 31, still in Kabul, still in the same compound where you were born. The almond tree in the courtyard is older, its roots deeper. Rostam is 7. He knows 300 words in English because you teach him every evening at the kitchen table, in whispers on paper scraps, the same way your father taught you. He thinks it's a game. You let him think that. For now.
Some evenings, you climb to the roof and look at the mountains. The Hindu Kush at dusk turns a shade of gold that belongs only to here, only to this light at this exact hour. You have looked at these mountains your whole life, through the crack in the wall when you were 5, through the university window at 20, through eyes that refuse to cry at 26. They have not changed. They do not change. You were promised nothing. You were handed a life in a country at war for longer than most people have been alive, in a body this country has never fully decided to protect. And you loved people fiercely, studied with everything you had, wrote down the names of women who needed someone to remember them, taught your son the word for mountain in 3 languages, climbed to this roof 10,000 times, and refused, absolutely refused, to stop looking up.
That refusal is not a small thing. That refusal is everything. You were born in Afghanistan, March 1995. You are 31 years old. Your story is not finished, and neither, somehow impossibly, are you. If you want to learn more about other countries, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment about which country you want the next video to be about.